Awesome. So let's get started. So today's wizard session is coming to you live from Workday Rising. So welcome everybody. Of course, we have the standard product statement. We are going to be checking out the whole product statement. And as usual, just don't make any Workday services purchasing based on future forward-looking statements. The extend plugin for IntelliJ is 3.75.1, which has definitely been updated since we last actually spoke, and will probably be updated again at the end of this week because 25R2. So if you've not updated, you definitely want to be updating. Questions, if I get you to throw those questions into the chat, is everyone able to see the chat? Just saw a hand go up there, so I just get through that question in the chat. Going to be the easiest way to manage this for just the one person. Much appreciated. Now, the other thing that I want to highlight today is the Orchestrate team has put in a bunch of quick starts, some really cool stuff here. There's some really great ways to get started with Orchestrate, and with Orchestrate, becoming GA, especially for O4I, the Orchestration for Integrations tools. These are going to be really important, especially as you're getting those newer developers coming in and you want to give them a really good chance to get a head start in Orchestrate. These are a really great set of videos put together by E.E. Wallace and the rest of the Orchestrate team, based on some scripts by Merrick. And of course, I mean, if you know the team of E.E. and Merrick, totally want to make sure that you grab this knowledge. There's a lot of really great information here. It's all been videoed, so they're all really cool, nice, easy, digestible chunks about how to, create an Orchestrate app, how to, play around, just getting some data out, using batch loops, join loops. Join loops are really tricky, but incredibly powerful. So if you need one to look at, I'm going to say check out Quick Start number 4. It is totally worth your time. And I'm just going to take a quick peek at the list here. Is there anyone from developer relations on? Did you guys want to take a quick talk? I know they're all very busy with rising duties, so I don't think they had a chance for anyone to actually join. So nope, I don't see anyone from Devrel on. So let's come on, go away. Let's get started. Oh, sure. Let's see if I care. Sorry, PowerPoint's just fighting with me a little bit. One moment, please. Huzzah! So today what we're going to be talking about, uh, Mitesh, yep, this will be recorded and you'll be able to find this recording on the developer forum. Let me just bounce back to the dev forum for a second. And it will be right here on this post in the developer forum. So let me just put that in the chat. Once we get this up, it'll be basically right here. There'll be a link to it. It's out on YouTube. I know there's a few folks wanted to see this, but this keynote going on right now. So like, yeah, watch the keynote. This will be recorded. And of course, if you've got somebody watching the recording and asking questions, they can just throw questions in the dev forum. We'll keep an eye on it. Awesome. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about attachments. So this is one of those topics that has been around for a long time, but it's actually a lot trickier than you might think, but also simpler. And a lot of it's just needing to understand what the underlying structure looks like. And once you know what the thing you're trying to build looks like, it gets a whole lot easier. So that's what we're going to spend a little bit of time on today. And I know that we've done some work with attachments before, and I'll direct you to some of those other resources for some of the pieces. But one of the things that we're going to be looking at today is specifically how do we get attachments from a page into an extend application. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about multi-part bodies. I'm going to take a brief little jump out and we're going to take a look at what the definition of an attachment looks like inside of your app builder. It's pretty straightforward and pretty simple. I don't think that's going to shock anyone too much. But what the multi-part body is, how you actually apply a file and some data into an attachment is kind of tricky. We're going to spend some time on how those pieces actually work. We're then going to dig into, okay, well, how do I do that PMD? How do I set that up so that I can create this kind of wacky file body on my API call inside of a PMD? And I'm going to do it in three different ways. I'm going to do it one, the old-fashioned way, because, well, you might actually see it. It still floats around. I've seen it like in the last couple of months. I've seen people using it. I'm going to show you the Graph API tool and why I kind of like the Graph API tool for attachments. And then we're going to dig into, well, what if I want to put in multiple attachments on a same page? How do we do that? Last but not least, I'm going to show you all of this on one big page, but we're going to start off, very great fashion, one piece at a time. So let me show you what an attachment looks like. App Builder. This is an attachment. So an attachment does. You can actually take a file from user and store it in a way that you want, fields and metadata that you want as well. But the cool thing about an attachment is attachments always have a file connection, but you can have as many fields here. Well, fifth, sort of topic, you've got a description and a resolution, and maybe you want to tag it for things. Aha, yes, please do change the top of the chat to everyone so that everyone can actually see it. I may not have, there may have been a question there that I missed. Always just a little bit tricky. Thanks, Noah. And aha, great question. Will attachments be added in the grid level anytime in the future, like in the row level? The short answer to that is I'm not really expecting that. There are some things that you can do with attachments on grids, but when you start dealing with multiple attachments in grids, it can be a little tricky. Let me get a little bit further into this, and then towards the end, as we're talking about how we get stuff back out again, we'll see a few different ways that you can play around and get a similar effect to that. But I think you'll find that it's going to be pretty tricky. So great question, but put a pin in that one. I'll definitely come back to this one. Getting one attachment patchet to all rows in the grid. Could you give me a little more information on that? Because if that's what I think you're saying, there is a way to do that, and I'll show you that. And I'll show you that one towards the end. It's not quite what I'd prepared, but it's kind of cool. So there's some new things you can do with it nowadays. So give me a little bit more information on what exactly you're doing. So if you're just trying to get one file and put it into a bunch of different rows, we can do that, but you'll use an orchestration for that. So let me jump back here just for a second. And I've got an attachment. It's got some fields. I've got three fields here, a description, a resolution, and some tags. Now, when we're trying to put data into this attachment, we're going to use a multi-part file body, and that's the tricky part. That's the thing that's going to make this both possible and a little bit complicated. Now, what is a multi-part file body? Well, way back when, like cast yourself back in time to the very beginning of the internet, specifically um, Mime, which, and if you've never seen the song, she never told me, or heard the song, she never told me she was a mime. It's one of Weird Al's great songs. So definitely uh, a, a good way to get yourself into this proper mindset. Be a little silly. The multi-purpose internet mail extensions is a way that email allowed us to have attachments. You've probably attached a file to an email. Well, very literally doing the same thing. You do the same structure here for all of these tools for both email and HTTP calls. Let's see here. It'd be more like each attachment has its unique object to be associated to it, and its row is a unique instance. Aha. Well, we'll see something similar to that. We can do that on the upload side, and you can do that on the download side, but it would not be in a grid. You're going to be using a file uploader and a file uploader row for that. So um, the file uploader widget was designed specifically to do this. And so we'll play around a little bit with that, and I'll show you a couple of pieces where you can get some good sample code for that. Great question there, Alana. Let me just pop that back open. Notice that I can reference out from this attachment to a business object. So in this case, my topic tags are a multi-instance reference object here to this knowledge base. And if I look, say, on the support invoice, and I were to add a field and single instance it, I can absolutely take that model component and I can reference from a model component to an attachment. So this can go both directions and can be really useful in a lot of ways. I didn't set that up on this just because I wanted this to be a standalone object, but you can absolutely do that. Now, you have to think about your data model when you do that, though. And let me just pause for a moment and just go a little bit sideways. When we're building a data model here, I've got a knowledge base here and I can put all the fields I want here. I can put all this metadata on one object. There's not a whole lot of times where you need to take a business object and single instance out to an attachment. Multi-instance is more common actually, because you're going to have a support invoice and a bunch of receipts, say. And in that case, yeah, you would probably want to do that exactly the way you do it. Would referencing the attachment from the model component business object be a better design for reporting purposes? Sometimes yes. And the thing you'll probably end up doing is you'll end up referencing both directions. So you'll have a support invoice, and we'd add in a field that references, like I was just showing you here, references the knowledge base object, and from the knowledge base object, we'd refer back to the support invoice so that when your users are creating a report, if they create a report off the support invoice data source, they'll be able to see the knowledge base items as a child object. They won't be able to get to the actual files, but they'll get to the metadata. Or if they create an object or report off the knowledge base report item, they'll be able to look back up to the support invoice. So just the same way you would if you have mutually supporting relationships between business objects, you do the same thing with the knowledge base attachment object here. Great questions, folks. Alana and Mo, did that answer your questions? I know I didn't answer your question, Latau, and Narendran will definitely take a quick peek at some of those things you can do with those items. Awesome. So fundamentally, what we're trying to answer here is we're trying to answer, how do I actually make that API call? So how do I make an API call that has both binary data in it and text data, and I'm trying to mash those two things together in a single, like, text object? Because remember, this all has to be text. We're doing this over SMTP if it was email, or HTTP, which is what we're actually doing it on, hypertext transfer protocol. The first T in there kind of tells you what we're doing. We're going to use something here called multi-part or form data. The file is going to be base64 encoded, and if those of you who have been around the KSSs for a long time, you'll remember when Chris actually showed that you can base64 encode inside of a PMD script using a large PMD script, but the easy way of doing base64 encoding is in fact in an orchestration. And without forward-looking statement, I'm going to show you some orchestration tools that will allow you to do some of those fun things if you're trying to move stuff around. And yes, Elena, definitely. So the question is, I get confused with the best business object design, because if you reference both ways, it's also more complicated when you have to delete or edit an instance. It absolutely is. And quite honestly, that's just a limitation of the tool. I'm not sure that they were really thinking about what the reporting was going to look like when they built the model object structure, and having to do this, single instance, circular referencing certainly makes things more complicated. But every user I've ever seen who saw that circular reference wanted it. They really, really want it. So it gives them that feel of how Workday works. So they're very happy if you actually implement it. So yeah, I understand it's more work and can really be painful, especially if you've got a lot of edits. But as long as you know it up front and build it into your code estimates, I think you'll find it's really powerful. So what does this look like? So this is literally what we're trying to build. So what we're trying to build is a text body that looks very much like what we're looking at on the screen right now. Let me just get the annotations up because I like to scribble. We're going to start off with a content type of multi-part or form data. And then we're going to have a boundary. And this is literally just a string. And it's probably got some sort of hash values in it. So it's usually, something to do with the app or the file, and then a whole bunch of basically random characters. And then you start off with that boundary, and we get to the first part. That first part has a name. We're going to call this data. This is something you can set. We can set what this value is. And you'll notice I've got a topic description, I've got a topic resolution, I've got my tags. All that stuff is here in one part. So this is in a form. Uh, I'm going to show you one of the fun problems that we're going to have when I break open Postman, and you'll see one of the challenges that this comes up with. Uh, the very classic mistake that everybody makes is they try to put each one of these values in their own part. And then, I see the question there, I'll get to it in just a second. Let me finish this thought. We're going to have another boundary string, and we're going to have this file data name. And again, we get to set this name. However, here's the tricky bit. Inside the data, we need to tell it, okay, where's my file? What part contains my file? And I'm going to say up here, content ID, file data is where the file lives. And so inside my data form part, I need to give it a map to where my file form part is. And then inside the file form part, for those of you who don't know, this is what a base64 encoded string looks like, and that's like 2.5K long. So let's see here. I've got a question. What if we reference the knowledge base BO from a field in the tags BO? The tags BO is secured by target on employee. Knowledge base is not secured by target. Can we access the knowledge base data via constrained security group? because the knowledge base does not have a constraint to it and you try to get to it through a constraint object, it's not going to be able to find that. What it will be able to find, it will be able to find everything in, say, the tags BO. So anything that you are looking at through the secured, you'll get the ID, you'll get the descriptor, but you will not get any of the child objects through a constrained security group. So you need to have security group constraint alignments in order for that to actually work. So you would either, well, the other thing you could do there is you could double up your security groups and allow everybody access to all of uh, the knowledge base items. And in that case, so basically you'd have one constraint item to get to the tags and an unconstrained security group to get to the knowledge base items and put the same populations in both. It's a very common design pattern. We see a lot with role-based security. You end up with one role-based constrained group and one role-based unconstrained group, both using the same role. That way it's no more maintenance. And that you'll use the unconstrained group to get to the knowledge-based data group, and you use the constrained group to get to the tags constrained object. That makes sense? There's a couple of ways you could actually achieve that, but yes, you're correct. If you come at an unconstrained object with a constrained security group, you do not get results. If you have the reference, you'll get the ID and descriptor, but you won't get anything else because that ID descriptor is stored in the tags object. Cool question. So, oh, it closed Postman on me. One moment, please. Let me just pop Postman open here. So this is what that exact call is going to look like in Postman. So you'll notice I'm making this call here, and here's what my body looks like. So I've got two items, and these are the same things as I was using in the text before. I've got a data name form, and I've got a file data name form. The mistake that everybody makes, and I've certainly made too, I'm putting my hand up here. Whenever we are looking at one of these setups, notice how inside the data box, I've got a JSON object that's got file, topic resolution, topic description, topic resolution. I must have dropped the tags out for some reason, but tags would be a list in there as well. And what everybody does is they'd put topic description as one of the key items and topic resolution as one of the key items, and that does not work. The keys up here, what these are, is these are the forms. Inside the forms, you fill out your data fields. And this piece here is the map that tells the system, hey, where's my file? The file is in the content ID of file data. So this file data inside this CID statement and this file data here need to be the same. If they are different, it's going to look for a file and it's just not going to find it. And it's a very easy mistake to make. And yes, it is case sensitive. So this is what we were just looking at live here. Ah, Rashad, great question. Do the key names need matter other than needing to match in the part? Nope, they do not matter at all. You set those. The CID colon, that matters. The file data doesn't matter at all. Put in whatever you want there. I will always give you the standard cautions of don't put in delimiters, don't put in spaces, make this, one nice, neat set of words. The file part here, that is important. That's how Workday's interpreter knows, okay, I'm looking for a file. Where do I find the file? So Workday sets the file, the structure sets the CID, you set this file data identifier. File data is up to you. Cool, great question. So now we end up with the old school way. How does this actually get implemented inside Workday? Now there's a bunch of different ways to do this. I'm going to take you through three of them. So three of these are going to be pretty common. The old school way, I don't recommend. I'm including it because it makes sense as soon as you start looking at what that JSON body needed to look like. it'll start to make sense about, okay, well, where does everything go now? And you're probably going to need to maintain this because, like I say, I've worked on an app that actually included this exact setup like 3 months ago. You are going to need a hidden widget. That hidden widget is going to have our content ID in it. These are normally done with value out bindings. You can do this with onsends, sort of, but I don't recommend it. Getting the file into the onsend is terrible, so just don't. Use value out bindings for this, and you'll notice that the value out bindings are using colons here and not dots, not periods. So a normal value out binding would be your endpoint name, outbound endpoint name, and then the file path, but it would normally use dots and not colons for delimiters. Because we're doing multi-part file, and I'll show you how we tell the outbound endpoint that it's a multi-part file structure, these need to be colons. And so what's going to happen is this is going to create that CID file data mapping element inside the JSON body. And if you miss this, your app will never be able to find where that file ended up. And again, the file data here needs to match the file data naming part. So notice that, let me just clear some of my scribbles here. I've got a data name object and I've got a file data name object, just like I was showing you in the text file and just like I was showing you in the Postman setup, these things need to match. So this file data here needs to match that file data there. Data is where I'm going to put my metadata. Okay, great. I've designed the body. How do I tell the outbound endpoint that, no, you're not going to just get JSON here. You're going to get actual file data too. So what you're going to see is you're going to see this one thing, and this is going to be your key that you're dealing with an attachment. You're going to see multi-part file last. So when you see this multi-part file last and set to true, that's telling the system, okay, this is going to be a multi-part file. You're getting form data, and look for form data in those value out bindings. If this is not set here, what'll happen, and the failure mode that you're going to get, and the one that I was actually fixing, was they could get all the metadata to save, all the metadata was saving perfectly, but the files weren't saving. Because the system was looking at that saying, okay, I can find the data, here's the data, but it didn't know that it's supposed to look for a file as well. And so all we had to do was set this one thing and everything magically started working. Now, before I move on to graph, does anyone have any questions on just the general structure of what that file needs to look like? Some great questions in the chat thus far. Now, we've talked a bunch about Graph API, and Graph API around attachments is a bit of an exception. As y'all have heard me say before, generally speaking with Graph, I'm going to become a really big fan of Graph as soon as I can build my whole app in it. As soon as I can take a new developer and say, you don't need to learn anything but Graph, that's when I'm going to tell you, go use Graph and use it for everything. Right now, you have to pick and choose when Graph is going to be really impactful. And I'm going to argue that for uploading single files, Graph API is the absolute exception here because it's so much cleaner. It's so much easier to set up. Copilot even builds with it. So if you're an Extend Pro customer, like Copilot will build the page to upload Graph for you just with a prompt. It really is like totally easy button. The only downside here is using Graph API, you're doing the files one at a time. On multi-part send, we can upload multiple files at the same time. So we're going to see that there's some pretty cool stuff that can happen there. But let's just see what this easy button looks like. And yes, I absolutely totally did build this using uh, Copilot. And it required some tweaks, but not much. So for those of you familiar with graph, this is a mutation. So remember, graph has two choices, mutation and query. Mutation changes data, queries don't. So this create knowledge base graph query, it's a mutation called create knowledge base. And all it needs, the only thing that we're going to put in here are the metadata elements. The mutation reads the file by default. It just assumes that you're going to be giving it a file, and it not something you really need to specify in your graph query. You do need to specify it, however, on your page. So here's a page that actually implements that graph query to create a knowledge base item. When we go to create a knowledge base item, we've got a set of variables here. I won't bore you with the widgets. I mean, literally just two text widgets, an instance list, and a file uploader. I don't know why I put a value of binding on that one. That is not necessary. I'll fix that. Oh, no, it is necessary. It needs to actually trigger the outbound endpoint. And there's one thing that you need to know. There's one thing that is really hard to find in the documentation, and this is the tricky bit. When you're doing this graph query, you need to give it attachment content. That attachment content is going to be file 0. And file 0 is what you need to work. Yes, this is buried in the documentation. You'll need to dig way down deep into the Graph API documentation, but you'll find that this is what sets up here. Now, the fact that this is file 0 indicates that maybe it's possible to put in a file 1, file 2, file 3. I have never successfully implemented that, however. So I'm going to say if you need to do multiple files, on multi-part send is a much better way to go. But for doing single files, like you can see how easy this is. Like here's the URL, here's my metadata, this is how I get my attachment content in here, and this is how simple the file uploader is. Like it's really that easy. And like I say, I really did use Extend Developer Copilot to build this page. Took a couple of tweaks and it was ready to go. Like I did this page in 2 minutes. So this is hugely powerful. This has got a lot of tools and techniques that you just, if you're doing a single file, this is the way to do it. Now, I understand that the chances of you actually needing to do just one file, I mean, they're they're like chips. You can't just stop at one, right? So that's why we go to on multi-part send. Now I want to talk about on multi-part send a little bit before I show you what the implementation looks like. Because there's one struggly bit that I have with on multi-part send, and that's the fact that we are using a template. And templates feel backwards for most users. Why do they feel backwards for most users? Because most users want to fill out the metadata first and then upload the file. Templates on the widget go the other way around. They need to upload the file and then apply the metadata. And I'm going to argue that fight with your users on this one. I know that they're going to say, hey, I just want to type everything in and then then do the file upload. Get them to do this the other way around. The reason for that is it allows you to synchronize the file and the metadata. I'm sure you're saying, what's he talking about? So what's going to happen when my user drops the files here, they're going to see two text widgets and an instance list, and then they fill out the metadata. And what most users want to do is they want to fill out the metadata and then create the file. The reason why I'm going to tell you to use the templates as they are is this right here. It keeps your metadata together. Because what I'm guessing from one of those earlier questions, if you actually put one of the things in here, and what a lot of people do is they'll put the metadata above and then just do a file uploader at the bottom. And then try to match up the metadata to data that's usually in a grid. The problem that you're going to have is the indexing. So the index of the rows, 0, 1, 2, 3 of the grid, and the indexing of the files are not coupled. They don't have to be the same. And if your user deletes a row too and adds a fourth row, they still see 3 rows here. Um, However, the indexing would be 0, 1, 3, 4. And when you try to match those indexes up to the file attachments, those indexes are going to become very problematic. It makes things incredibly difficult. And if it's at all possible to avoid, please do avoid it. Keep your file and your metadata together in the same widget. It'll make your life so much easier. And yes, you're correct, Rashad. Delivered Workday, it only exposes a bunch of that additional information after that file has been uploaded. So we're using the same widget that they are. Like, we're not reinventing the wheel here. But this is definitely something that they do. And so you can argue with the user usually pretty effectively, hey, you know what? This is something that's clear and effective for you to work with. It's the way the Workday does it. Just go this way. But like I say, I've had a lot of users ask me for the other, and I really do push back quite strongly on this. This is something that's going to make your life a ton easier if you can convince them, hey, let's just do it the Workday way. When you're building one of these, what I'm going to suggest you do is I'm going to suggest you build this in this order. We're going to have a file uploader. Then we're going to have a template. Then we're going to have the metadata that's reliant on the template. And then we're going to build the on multi-part send. What most people try to do is they try to build the on multi-part send and then they go back and try to build the template. And it really makes things a lot harder. So, and when I show you the pieces of the implementation, we'll walk through exactly what I mean by this, but I'm going to suggest be methodical about this. Start with your file uploader, get the template in place, and I'll show you what that looks like. Then do your metadata based on the template, and then do your on multi-part send based on the metadata. If you try to jump to the end and then work your way backwards, it makes your life way harder than it needs to be. And what's an on multi-part send? I'm sure somebody's asking that right now, and I'm glad you did. So what on multi-part send does is this allows you to loop through each file in a file uploader, find the template for it, and put those metadata values into the JSON for that file. So it solves that mismatched index problem that we were talking about. It solves it. It allows you to loop through and only put the metadata for that particular file on that particular file's data body. And it handles most of the actual work for you. Now let's go look at it live. It's more fun. So what I've built here is I've created an on multi-part send sample. And I tried to build this as simply as possible because one of the problems that I had when I went up to the dev forum and started looking for, okay, is there a sample that I can just steal? Um, Everything was like these 500 line monster pages. And I'll show you an example of what one of those looks like. But what I want you to think about here was it was so hard to try and figure, okay, what's the actual attachment piece? Let's just look at the actual attachment piece. I have one widget on this page. I have a file uploader. So this is only doing the attachment. So in my file uploader, I've given some file types, and I've got a file uploader row template. What this template does is when I add a file onto this, it's going to pop up these two widgets. And I only just chopped these down to these two widgets. The tags do work. It just ended up being a lot more complicated than I wanted it to be because I wanted to show a really simple example. So I've got two metadata objects. And I need to tell my system, okay, with each file, you're going to get two pieces of metadata. You're going to get a topic description and a topic resolution. These are always going to be null. You are setting up a class. We're creating a class here that will instantiate up in the on multi-part send. This is describing the data that is going to get passed to the on multi-part send, and it's going to pull out the topic description and resolution here and say, okay, these are the fields that we're going to be working with. Metadata is telling the system what the form data is going to look like. So great question, and Mo, absolutely. So this is telling you what the form's going to look like. What we're going to do is then we're going to fill this format here with some data, and that's going to become the form data for the file. Where do we do that? In the endpoint, in the on multi-part send, we're going to loop through each one of the files in the file uploader and put the metadata in. So what's going to happen is coming out of the template, we're going to start off in the first file index is 0. We're going to go through each one of those metadatas one piece at a time. And I know this is a little clunky, it looks a little weird. We're going to pick up the first content area and the second content area. First one's going to be topic description, second one's going to be topic resolution. And what that's going to do is that builds the form data for this particular setup. The on multi-part send assumes that we are sending a file and it handles the CID, the form name for the file, and all that. It handles all that for us. All we need to do is get the form data right. And to get the form data right, or sorry, the form metadata right, we describe what the metadata is going to look like, and then we loop through and tell it, okay, for each one of those form metadatas, because this can do multiple files, let's just do multiple files, shall we? Let's show you what that looks like. See if I've timed out yet. I have not timed out yet. Yay! Select a file. Put the Roxy Bird in here. And now I can put in another file. So now I can put in multiple files here. And what's going to happen is it's going to loop through. When I click OK, it's going to loop through these and say, okay, for this file, my description is eclipse is hard to see. My resolution is use telescope. For this file, my description is Roxy needs seeds, and the resolution is going to be feed Roxy. Does that make sense, Mo? The difference here, the metadata is describing what it's going to look like. It means that these fields here are already described, and I just need to feed some values into them. Awesome. So I hit OK here. And now if I bounce over to the view page, see if it's going to make a liar out of me. So now you can see that the Rocky has a problem description of Roxy needs seeds, and the eclipse square has a problem description of the eclipse hard to see. And we can play around with that. And these are some tags that I played with. And this is, of course, why I had to use a knowledge base here, just for those of you who've been around the internet long enough to remember all your knowledge bases are belong to us. Yes, for great justice. It was a lot of lead up for a kind of a sad joke, but I'm okay with that. Now, Aha, Rashad, good catch. So what you need to do is you need to know where your content areas map to these values. Why we give you this metadata description is this allows you to make named data aspects where these are going to be ordered. And it allows you to say, you know what? I want to present to my user in a certain order, and that order may not be reflective of the names I'm going to be giving in here. So this allows you flexibility in your user interface. So yeah, really good observation there, Rajat. It allows you to, if we're going to add in additional metadata fields, so let's say I've added a new metadata field and I need to figure out where this goes and I want it to go up top, then yes, I will probably need to reorder these indexes. Very commonly, what I'll see is these indexes along with these names will be stored in an array somewhere so that you can just build that as a file map and allow you to just map those things back and forth. But again, it was a more complicated setup here, and I wanted to show you a nice simple one. Good catch, Rashad. So yeah, build that in a map, and I think you'll find that works out really well. Now, there's a very common, very persistent myth that goes along with attachments. And I've set something up here just to show you that, yes, it totally works. Attachments do not need to be alone on a page. In the very dark, distant past, a long, long time ago, you had to build an attachment on its own page. That has not been the case for years now. And I've set up a sample of that. So if I can look at the create support invoice bedazzled, this creates both a support invoice object and a knowledge base object on the same page. Now I used graph here just because, again, I like graph for a nice simple setup, but the on multi-part send works as well. And just to make it really interesting, I even threw a deferred endpoint on here to show another little design pattern. So whenever we're putting in topic tags or something with tags, a lot of times people ask, well, hey, can I add a tag if I need it? And of course, I have to thank Angie for all of the help with the emojis. I'm getting better with it, but let's just jump back to this here. And of course, back to our early 2000s internet memes. I can has KB article. I can pick a technician name, say feed Roxy, $4. And let's say I need to add in a new knowledge base tag. So if I look at my tags list here, I've got cowbell, because you always need more cowbell. I've got some early internet memes, orchestrations extend. Well, I need to feed my feed burb. And I can add that in here without leaving this page. And that's, I think, the key thing here that a lot of people miss is I can use a deferred endpoint with a post. So here's a deferred endpoint with a post. And when I hit add new tag value, clears that out. And now I've got the extra tag on here. So this is a fun little design pattern. And I wanted to show you this because now I want you to see everything we're doing on this page. I've got two objects. I've got an invoice data object, I've got a knowledge base object, and I've got the knowledge base tag object all being managed on the same page, and it all works. Pick a file, and now all these will go through. Don't error out on me. So now you can see that we can get through all of those pieces cleanly and easily on a single page. And so, like I say, way back in the old times, Back when we only had the hidden widget method, even very early on in the hidden widget method, you had to do them on their own page. That's not true anymore. Does anyone have any questions on getting attachments in? I know there's the earlier question about how do we start putting stuff into grids, and I want to tinker around with a couple of things that we can play with. But does anyone have any questions on this piece of it before I go cowboying off in the last few minutes of our time? Awesome. So, Mo, an interesting thing here. So Mo's question is, I'm curious to see how multiple attachments look like from the body perspective in Postman. So what we're actually doing here, and let me just show you this on the API logs. When I do the on multi-part send and I added two files here, notice that we only went through a single item here. And what's going to happen is in Postman, what's happening is it's not doing uh, like it's not saying, hey, okay, now I've got data two and then file data two. I've never actually tried to do this because uh, that's not actually how the system works. On multi-part send uses the batch protocol and just batches all these together as individual sends. So you get basically one send to the on multi-part send on the back end, and that's why it's using the collections, which reminds me, I should highlight that. On multi-part send uses a different URL. So the on multi-part send goes to a collection. And what this does is this behind the scenes is doing a batch protocol call, and there's a KSS on batch protocol, totally worth your time to look it up. Um, Chris did a really great job on that one. And what it does is it takes each one of the API calls that we're sending, puts them together in a batch protocol, and then submits them all as one big batch. So rather than trying to do a bunch of files in a single body, it does a bunch of calls, puts them together, and then sends them as a batch. That makes sense? So unfortunately, this is a little bit hard to mimic inside of Postman. And again, just because it's doing so much behind the scenes to make your life easier, it certainly makes this a whole lot easier and a lot tighter, but it is kind of tricky. And Jim, yes, this Jim's question is, this is timely. It completed the tutorial model components attachments. Awesome. Well done. It's a great tutorial. And there will be updates to the Learning After Rising. That's what I'm hearing as well. But like I say, the keynote is going on as we speak, and I'm excited to go see what things that they've announced for it. And that's right, Mo. Yeah, it's handled batch protocol on the back end. You don't need to worry about it. You just set this data up and let it handle how it handles the world in the back end. Um, and you'll find that that actually ends up being faster. And that's the big trick here. I will highlight that this outbound endpoint is still going to have the same limits that you have everywhere, 25 megabytes. So don't go crazy with your attachments. It's very easy to get attachments to stack up over 25 megs. And unfortunately, back to the one of the earlier comments, you don't get to see those file sizes until it actually tries to submit the file. So can be a little bit tricky to try and manage that, especially with users who want these huge files, because yeah, there's some pretty big PDFs out there. Do the submissions go through if the file is too big? They do not. If you exceed the 25 meg endpoint limit, it does not submit it. You can set file size elements on the file uploader. So this is typically what I'll recommend folks do is file uploader. We can set a max file size of, this is in bytes. So always tricky, 1 MB. And it'll actually error out and warn the user, hey, that file's too big. But there's no way to stop the user from putting in 30 1 MB files. Is there a do not add? I don't think there is. There is not. So in that case, if your user puts in a ton of files that are all below your max file size, they can absolutely exceed that limit. And I've certainly seen that happen in the wild. It's not common. Usually when a user is doing that, they know they're doing something wrong and can be convinced, okay, yeah, please just break those up. But it is definitely a challenge. Awesome. Thanks, Rashad. Now, I realize we're just about out of time. Um, the file uploader here is going to be what you're going to see for the best way to do multiple files on a page. The other things you can start to do with grids. So this is a way of looking at the grids or looking at attachments through a grid. And this has got the standard Workday ID pieces. The download ID is available. And I just have this, I built this page just so I could delete out the stuff that I was building and playing with. But if I hit delete, say, it's going to pop me up to another page. This is set up as a micro page. And this allows you to modify, do whatever you need. Here's the download ID, so you can actually present what that file looks like. Put this into a file uploader, allow them to delete or edit. So I can delete this item out of here and then return me back to that grid page. So to the earlier question of can we put these attachments into a grid? No, it does not work well. However, we can put the objects themselves, the metadata objects, into the grid, and then by using buttons off of this, come up with a very scalable, very powerful design pattern that would allow you to modify, patch, update individual files. So I hope that answers the question earlier. I think this is a really good design pattern for it. This is very easy to implement using Graph. So all this that you're looking at right now, I implemented with Graph. It was trivially easy to build. And by bringing them to that micro page that shows them the file, allows them to modify it or delete it, that's how you can actually get to a really good savable format. What your user wants is, I just want to be able to put everything in on one page like it's a giant Excel spreadsheet. And the answer to that question is you really don't want to do that because you're just going to time out. You're going to have a user put in 1,000 items and it's just not going to work. We're going to time out and it's going to be really troublesome. They're better off having a bit clickier interface that saves as it goes. And sure, Mo, we'll definitely put Graph API on a wizard session for sure. And I see we're over time. Thank you all for your time. Really appreciate it. This Extend app is available for download as we speak. So if you look at this wizard section page, they're hosted on GitHub. The session files are here. You can grab that anytime you want. I think you need to sign up for a free GitHub uh, uh, account, but it's free, and they don't check if you can just grab it right from there. Thanks, everybody. If anyone has any other questions, I can stick around another couple minutes, but thanks, everyone. Have a great day.